Hello everyone, my name is Deontay Gibbs, and for today's presentation, I will be discussing equipment for living from the movie Silver Linings Playbook. So for my thesis, the literary theorist Kenneth Burke notes that equipment for living offers strategies for dealing with situations or solving problems inherited in it. Although there are disparities among minority populations in seeking mental health care, along with complicated adjustments to normalcy, the film Silver Linings Playbook provides equipment for living for people who struggle with various mental disorders, as the film conveys the message of having mutual support for people to be their best selves while managing their symptoms and living to their potential. So, upon the onset of deinstitutionalization, close friends or relatives are cited as the main sources of support and sustenance for the mentally ill individual. However, when human support begins to subside due to experiencing constant hardships affiliated with caring for a mentally ill person, said individuals may have complications in adjusting to their environment after treatment or release from a psychiatric institution. Furthermore, minority populations are likely to encounter considerable barriers to care and help seeking. The film stars Bradley Cooper, who plays a man named Pat Salatano Jr., who suffers from a bipolar disorder. He was just released from a psychiatric hospital and lives with his parents, and he tries to win back his wife. He begins to experience several episodes of hypomanic and depressive mood swings. He also blames his instability on his childhood and his parents. He begins to change his outlook on life and attempts to seek the silver linings. Tiffany Maxwell, who is played by Jennifer Lawrence, she also suffers from a mental disorder. She blames her mental illness on the loss of her husband in a fatal car accident. Tiffany offers to deliver a letter from Pat to Nikki, who is Pat's ex-wife, if he enters a dance competition with her. So, as for a literature review to begin with, Young indicates how viewers apply their analysis of film and synthesization of these film messages into their everyday lives. Silver Linings Playbook provides equipment for living for people who struggle with various mental disorders. The film conveys the message of having mutual support for people to be their best selves while managing their symptoms and living to their potential. Seifert points out that the ability of cinematic forms to invoke physiological responses in the audience is unusual. However, the film exhibits the uh, rhetorical rule of communicative sensualities, certainly like the article by Young. I made this generalization that the film messages resonate with the person. That person gives feedback, whether it's physical, emotional, social, or mental. So, this feedback can be a result of the film's equipment for living, and those who suffer from mental disorders may have the tendency of giving mental responses as messages from the film convene with them. In the mental health realm, physical health disparities overshadow disparities in mental health essentially. So, although there have been advances in obtaining healthcare services, communities of color tend to experience uncommon and considerable challenges in accessing mental health services due to various reasons, including negative attitudes, treatment issues, lack of insurance, and co-occurring disorders. McGuire and Miranda clearly explain that mental health care disparities are defined as unfair differences in access to our quality of care according to race and ethnicity, and they are quite common in mental health. So, mental and behavioral health is a crucial and recurrently unaddressed subject in racial and ethnic minority populations. And these minority populations include African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, and American Indians. So there are also two traditions of communication theory, and there are the socio-psychological and the social cultural traditions. So, according to Littlejohn and Foss, the social psychological tradition fixates on individual social behavior, psychological variables, individual effects, personality and traits, perception, and cognition. The social cultural tradition addresses the ways our meanings, understandings, norms, and roles and rules are worked out interactively in communication. Sorry, guys, went a little too fast. But both traditions are present regarding assessing individuals with mental disorders and the current mental health disparities among minority populations. A random group of individuals, this is for my methodology, a random group of individuals will be selected to participate in a survey and attend a private movie screening. So after reading, before showing the film, participants will be given a pre-screening survey that will be an invitation to the film as well. Questions on a survey will be multiple choice, open-ended, and Likert scale based. And the first few questions below will assess demographics, specifically age, gender, and race. And as for the next four questions, are you familiar with the film Silver Linings Playbook? Literary theorist Kenneth Burke defines equipment for living as rhetoric of action for dealing with situations or solving problems fixated in them. Do you feel that various films provide equipment for living? Do you or any relative have a mental disorder? If so, what type? Lastly, consider this statement. Mental disorders are assessed adequately by the media and policymakers. Do you strongly agree, neutral stance, disagree, or do you strongly disagree? So once the film concludes, I would administer a follow-up survey to include the following questions. In your opinion, did the film yield an accurate portrayal of mental disorders? What lessons were you able to learn after viewing the film? Are your feelings towards the statement mental disorders are addressed adequately by the media and policymaker the same, or has it changed? If it's changed, how so? And the data will then be examined using the statistical package for the social sciences software, also known as SPSS. So as for data, the demographic data will be collected from the pre-screening surveys and will be evaluated using SPSS software. The use of summary statistics will be unnecessary, and this will be unnecessary as most of the survey questions are open-ended and qualitative based. Responses from both surveys will be analyzed to determine how effective Silver Linings Playbook equipment for living convene with the viewers. Respondents who have family members or even close friends that have a mental disorder may have an increased receptivity from the film's message. Said respondents would have more experience in coping with individual struggles with daily life, battling with their mental disorders. Therefore, the film's message would be straightforward. It would also be crucial to compare responses to the statement mental disorders are assessed adequately by the media and policymakers from the pre-screening survey and follow-up survey. The respondent's perception of mental disorders may have either shifted or remained constant after viewing the film. Another critical element to address is other possible lessons that were learned, not specific to mental health. The respondent's perception of mental disorders may have either shifted or remained constant after viewing the film. Other questions addressing the participants' opinions on mental disorders being addressed adequately in the film's portrayal of mental disorders would also aid in assessing the current state of mental health within minority populations. If the responses are comparable, it could be fair to determine that other lessons can be learned. Furthermore, the original thesis may nullify. Young properly reports that by focusing on the audience's struggles and failures, David Payne adds a progressive and or developmental dimension to the idea that rhetoric can change lives if failures can be corrected and that change can be in the positive direction. So my observation of how Silver Linings Playbook bestows equipment for living interceded this work by analyzing the fundamentals of how various publications address the psychology of cinematic forms, mental health disparities, and the traditions of communication theory. Respondents who have familiarity in contending with their relatives or close friends struggle with everyday life, striving with their impairments will take a straightforward message from Silver Linings Playbook. Consequence, Consequently, respondents with family or friends with mental disorders would grasp the film's main idea without difficulty. Cypher reasonably writes that the success of The Fugitive suggests that the physiological elements of its entertainment offers rhetoric of action that is as valid and is subject to criticism as any symbolic interpretation of narrative, ideology, or myth. The rhetoric of action can be shown through Silver Linings Playbook by means of audience feedback as lessons from the film convened with the individual. These reactions could be an after effect of the film's equipment for living, and those who struggle with mental disorders will give either physical, mental, emotional, or social feedback as scenes from the movie resonate with them. Miranda and McGuire accurately say that black Americans may have higher rates of various mental disorders, and diagnostic problems may account for the increased prevalence rate. Inquiring the respondent's conception on Silver Linings Playbook's portrayal of mental disorders compared to the current conditions of mental health would aid in assessing the disparities of mental health within minority communities. Littlejohn and Foss acknowledge that the social psychological perspective sees persons as entities with characteristics that lead them to behave in independent ways. This tradition is evident within characters of Silver Linings Playbook had dependent determinants behind their mental disorders. For example, Pat places fault of his mental imbalances on his parents and troubled childhood. Similarly, Tiffany faults her mental disorder on the tragic loss of her husband. As for the social cultural tradition, the concentration is on patterns of interaction between people rather than on individual characteristics or mental models. Both Pat and Tiffany were able to establish an interesting friendship primarily based on their mental disorders and how they can help each other in achieving their individual goals. The works of Cypher and Young bring attention to how films and programming can highlight vital messages concerning mental health, as McGuire and Miranda present specific information behind the disparities of mental health care. So these works, along with Silver Linings Playbook, accentuates the need to address the current state of mental health and how to handle the subject. So here's my works cited, and thank you all for watching.